The Dakota Territory, 1875. The land stretched endlessly beneath the vast blue sky. Rolling hills of prairie grass swaying in the breeze like waves on a golden ocean. Thundercloud rode his painted horse along the ridge overlooking Deadwood Creek, his dark eyes scanning the horizon with the vigilance of a man who had learned early that survival depended on awareness. At 35, his face was weathered by sun and wind, marked with the subtle lines of a man who had seen both beauty and brutality in equal measure. The son of a respected Lakota chief and a captive white woman who had eventually become his father's cherished wife, Thundercloud walked between two worlds, never fully belonging to either. His mixed heritage had given him unique advantages, fluency in English and understanding of white ways, but had also marked him as an outsider among many of his own people. Hello, friends! If you're enjoying this story, please don't forget to subscribe to our channel. I'd love to know what city you're watching from. Drop it in the comments below. 3 miles east, the town of Willow Springs emerged from the prairie like an afterthought, a collection of wooden structures, hopeful and precarious against the immensity of the landscape. It had sprung up 2 years earlier when gold was discovered in the nearby hills, bringing an influx of miners, merchants, and the inevitable camp followers that trailed opportunity. Though small, it boasted the essential establishments of frontier civilization: a general store, 2 saloons, a blacksmith, a small hotel, and a church still under construction. Thundercloud avoided towns when possible, but necessity occasionally drove him to trade there, exchanging pelts for ammunition, coffee, and other supplies he couldn't make himself. He had earned a fragile respect from some of the townspeople, who valued his skills as a tracker and his knowledge of the territory, though others viewed him with the suspicion and prejudice common on the frontier. The territorial governor had recently negotiated yet another treaty, pushing the Lakota further from their ancestral lands, and tensions simmered beneath the surface of every interaction between whites and natives. Thundercloud's people were being squeezed into ever-shrinking reservations, their way of life systematically dismantled. He had watched his father struggle with these changes, choosing a path of reluctant accommodation rather than bloody resistance, reasoning that survival of their people and culture, even in altered form, was paramount. Not all agreed. Many young warriors had joined Crazy Horse and Sitting Bull in the north, choosing to fight rather than submit. Thundercloud understood both paths and the impossible choice they represented. His own choice had been to live mostly alone in the borderlands, maintaining traditional ways while serving occasionally as an interpreter and scout for the army, a position that earned him distrust from both sides. As he guided his horse down the slope toward the creek, a sound caught his attention: the distant rumble of wagon wheels, unusual in this remote area and potentially dangerous. Thundercloud dismounted swiftly, leading his horse into a stand of cottonwoods for concealment. From this position, he could observe without being seen. Minutes later, a single wagon appeared, bouncing precariously over the uneven ground, driven by a woman alone, a shocking sight in this untamed country. Her chestnut hair was coming loose from its pins, catching the afternoon light as she struggled to control the team of horses pulling the wagon. Something was wrong. The horses seemed panicked, the wagon veering dangerously. As it drew closer, he could see blood staining the woman's blue dress. Not her blood, he realized, but likely from a body wrapped in canvas in the wagon bed. Thundercloud's instincts warned him to remain hidden. A white woman alone with a dead body meant trouble, and trouble with whites inevitably fell hardest on people like him. But when the wagon wheel struck a boulder and shattered, sending the vehicle crashing onto its side and throwing the woman to the ground, he found himself running toward her before he had consciously decided to help. The horses strained against their harnesses, whinnying in distress. The woman lay motionless on the ground, and for a moment, Thundercloud feared she was dead. Then she stirred, pushing herself up with visible effort, her face contorted in pain. When she saw him approaching, her eyes widened in fear. She scrambled backward, reaching for something in the folds of her skirt, a small derringer, which she pointed at him with trembling hands. "Stay back," she commanded, her voice surprisingly steady despite her obvious fear. Thundercloud stopped, raising his hands to show he meant no harm. "Your wagon is broken," he said in careful English. "You are hurt. I can help." The woman's green eyes assessed him warily, taking in his buckskin clothing, the knife at his belt, the Winchester rifle slung across his back. "Who are you?" she demanded, the small pistol still aimed at his chest. "I am called Thundercloud," he replied, remaining still. "I mean no harm to you." The standoff might have continued if one of the horses hadn't suddenly bolted, still harnessed to the broken wagon, dragging it several feet before stopping. The violent movement shifted the canvas-wrapped bundle, partially exposing the face of a dead man. Middle-aged, with a gray beard and a bullet hole centered neatly between his eyes. The woman's gaze darted to the corpse, then back to Thundercloud. Her expression hardened with resolve. "My name is Sarah Kingsley," she said, slowly lowering the derringer. "That man was my husband, Daniel. He was murdered yesterday by the Blackwell brothers. I'm taking him home to bury him properly." Thundercloud recognized the name. The Blackwell brothers, Mason, Elijah, and Curtis, were notorious throughout the territory, a family of killers who worked as hired guns for wealthy ranchers looking to eliminate competition for land and water rights. "Why did they kill him?" Thundercloud asked, moving slowly to calm the panicked horses. Sarah's laugh was bitter as winter frost. "Because my husband refused to sell our farm. The railroad is coming through next year, and suddenly our worthless plot of land is valuable." When Daniel declined Jacob Warner's insulting offer, Warner set his dogs on us. Warner was the largest cattle rancher in the territory, a man with political connections and ruthless ambition. "You cannot go alone," Thundercloud said, freeing the horses from their harnesses. "The Blackwells will be tracking you. They don't leave witnesses." Sarah's chin lifted defiantly. "I can handle myself. I just need to fix this wagon and get Daniel home." Thundercloud shook his head, looking at the splintered wheel and damaged axle. "Wagon cannot be fixed here. Need tools. New wheel." He glanced at the sun, calculating the remaining daylight. "My camp is 1 hour north. We can bring horses, take your husband. Tomorrow, I help you reach your home." Sarah looked as though she might argue, but exhaustion and practicality won out. "Why would you help me?" she asked, suspicion evident in her voice. Thundercloud considered the question. Why indeed? Helping this woman could bring the wrath of both Warner and the Blackwells down on him, and he had survived by avoiding such entanglements. Yet something in her courage and determination resonated with him. "Your husband deserves proper burial," he said simply, "and no one deserves to face Blackwells alone." It took considerable effort to recover Daniel's body from the wagon and secure it over one of the horses. Sarah worked alongside Thundercloud without complaint, though he noticed her wincing from what appeared to be a bruised or possibly broken rib. By the time they set out for his camp, the sun was beginning its descent toward the western horizon, casting long shadows across the prairie. Thundercloud led the way on foot, leading his horse with Daniel's body, while Sarah rode the second horse, her spine straight despite her evident pain and exhaustion. Thundercloud's camp was situated in a small canyon, invisible until they were nearly upon it. A stream provided fresh water, while the surrounding walls offered protection from both weather and unwanted eyes. A brush shelter stood against one wall, and a small fire pit lined with stones occupied the center of the space. After helping Sarah dismount, Thundercloud carefully removed Daniel's body and placed it on a flat rock shelf, high enough to keep predators away during the night. Sarah watched his respectful handling of her husband with surprise, perhaps having expected less consideration from a man her society had taught her to fear. While she rested, Thundercloud unsaddled the horses and prepared a simple meal of jerked venison and hard biscuits. They ate in silence as darkness settled over the canyon, each lost in their own thoughts. Finally, Sarah spoke. "You speak English very well," she observed. It wasn't what Thundercloud had expected her to say. "My mother was white," he explained. "Captured during raid when young, became my father's wife. She taught me." Sarah's expression revealed her struggle to reconcile this information with her preconceptions. "Where is your family now?" Thundercloud stared into the fire. "Most are at agency reservation, some with Sitting Bull in North. My father died 2 winters ago. Mother returned to her people in Minnesota." The simplicity of his answer seemed to touch Sarah, perhaps reminding her that loss was universal. "I'm sorry about your father," she said quietly. Thundercloud nodded in acknowledgement. "Tomorrow I will take you to your home," he said, changing the subject. "How far?" Sarah hesitated before answering. "Our farm is about 15 miles east of Willow Springs, along Cottonwood Creek." Thundercloud frowned. "That is 2 days' journey carrying your husband." He considered their options. "We should bury him here with respect. Then you travel faster, safer." Sarah's response was immediate and fierce. "No. Daniel will be buried on our land, where he belongs, where our children can visit him." Her determination was admirable, if impractical. Thundercloud didn't argue further, recognizing the importance of her mission. "Sleep," he advised instead. "Tomorrow is long day." He offered her the shelter, but Sarah chose to sleep near her husband's body, wrapped in a blanket Thundercloud provided. He remained by the fire. Planning their route for the morning and considering the dangers they would face, the Blackwells were skilled trackers. They would find the abandoned wagon and follow their trail. Warner had connections throughout the territory. They couldn't count on help from local law enforcement. Their best hope was to travel quickly and avoid detection, reaching Sarah's farm before their pursuers caught up. As the fire burned down to embers, Thundercloud reflected on the strange twist of fate that had placed this woman's safety in his hands. He had spent years cultivating isolation, yet here he was, drawn into a conflict that was not his own. Perhaps some paths could not be walked alone, no matter how carefully one planned. Dawn broke with the promise of heat, the sky clear and mercilessly bright. Thundercloud had been awake for an hour, having slept lightly, alert to any sounds that might indicate pursuit or danger. Sarah stirred as he returned from scouting the area, her face pale but determined in the early light. They shared a quick breakfast of cold biscuits and coffee before preparing to depart. Thundercloud had spent part of the night fashioning a travois, a triangular frame of branches that could be dragged behind a horse. to transport Daniel's body more efficiently. Sarah watched his work with appreciation. "You've thought of everything," she remarked, helping to secure her husband to the travois. Thundercloud shrugged. "Travois is the traditional way to move camp, carry wounded or dead. My people used for centuries." Sarah's expression softened. "Thank you," she said simply. Thundercloud acknowledged her gratitude with a nod, uncomfortable with her direct gaze. As they traveled, Sarah gradually shared more of her story. She and Daniel had come west 5 years earlier, drawn by the promise of land and a fresh start. Daniel had been a carpenter in Chicago, but the economic panic of 1873 had wiped out their savings and left them desperate for new opportunities. Their early years in the Dakota Territory had been brutally difficult. Drought, grasshopper plagues, and harsh winters had tested their resolve. Just as they had begun to establish themselves, building a sturdy cabin and successfully cultivating 40 acres, the plans for the railroad had transformed their struggling homestead into coveted property. "Warner offered us $100 for land we've put 5 years of blood and tears into," Sarah said bitterly. "Land that will be worth 20 times that once the railroad comes through." Thundercloud listened without comment. The story was familiar. He had witnessed the pattern repeated countless times as white settlement pushed westward, the strong devouring the weak in the name of progress. They traveled cautiously, keeping to ravines and wooded areas when possible, to avoid being silhouetted against the horizon. Thundercloud set a grueling pace, aware that speed was their greatest ally. Despite her injuries, Sarah kept up without complaint, impressing him with her endurance. By midday, they had covered nearly 10 miles. They paused briefly at a small stream to rest the horses and drink. As Sarah filled their canteens, Thundercloud noticed a cloud of dust in the distance. Riders, moving fast in their direction. "We must go," he said urgently, helping her onto her horse. "Riders coming." Sarah's face paled. "The Blackwells?" Thundercloud didn't answer, already securing the travois to his horse. They had barely mounted when the sound of gunfire split the air, a bullet kicking up dirt near Sarah's horse. 5 riders had appeared on the ridge above them, silhouetted against the sky. 3 of them matched the descriptions of the Blackwell brothers, large men with distinctive red beards. The other 2 were likely hired guns. "Ride!" Thundercloud commanded, spurring his horse forward while drawing his Winchester. Sarah needed no encouragement, galloping ahead while Thundercloud provided covering fire. The pursuers scattered momentarily, then regrouped and continued the chase. Thundercloud knew they couldn't outrun the Blackwells with the travois slowing them down. They needed to find defensible ground. A mile ahead, he recalled a rocky outcropping that would provide some cover. He guided Sarah toward it. Both of them bent low over their horses' necks as bullets whined past. They reached the rocks just as one of the pursuers' bullets found its mark, striking Thundercloud's shoulder. The impact nearly unseated him, but he managed to stay mounted until they reached shelter. Sarah gasped when she saw the blood spreading across his buckskin shirt. "You're hit!" Thundercloud grimaced, sliding from his horse. "Not bad," he lied, positioning himself behind a boulder with his rifle. "Take horses behind rocks. Stay down." The wound was worse than he had admitted. The bullet had passed through his shoulder, missing bone but causing significant blood loss. Thundercloud tore a strip from his shirt and bound the wound tightly, focusing on the approaching riders to distract himself from the pain. The Blackwells and their men had dismounted and were spreading out, intending to surround their position. "Mrs. Kingsley," a voice called out, We ain't got no quarrel with you, ma'am. Just hand over the engine, and you can be on your way with your dearly departed." Sarah's answer was a rifle shot that kicked up dirt at the speaker's feet. Thundercloud glanced at her in surprise as she worked the lever on Daniel's Henry rifle. "Daniel taught me to shoot," she explained grimly. "Said a woman alone on the frontier needed to know how to protect herself." The standoff continued through the afternoon, a deadly game of patience. The Blackwells were content to wait, knowing time was on their side. Thundercloud's wound continued to bleed despite his efforts to staunch it. By late afternoon, he was lightheaded from blood loss, his shots becoming less accurate. Sarah noticed his deteriorating condition with alarm. "You need a doctor," she whispered, tearing strips from her petticoat to create a fresh bandage. Thundercloud shook his head. "No time. No doctor." He winced as she tightened the bandage. "Must hold until dark. Then you can escape." Sarah's green eyes flashed with determination. "I'm not leaving you. You risk your life for me and Daniel. We leave together, or not at all." Thundercloud wanted to argue, but conserved his strength. As the sun began to set, he outlined a desperate plan. "When dark, we make noise here, shoot guns, then slip away through rocks on other side. They will not expect." Sarah nodded, her face resolute in the fading light. "We'll make it," she assured him, though whether she truly believed it was another matter. As darkness settled over the landscape, they set their plan in motion. Thundercloud placed his hat on a stick, raising it occasionally to draw fire, while Sarah led the horses quietly through a narrow passage in the rocks. The ruse worked for precious minutes, giving them time to mount and slip away into the gathering darkness. They rode hard, following a dry creek bed that Thundercloud knew would lead them toward Sarah's farm. Behind them, they heard shouts of discovery and pursuit, but they had gained a valuable head start. Thundercloud fought to remain conscious, focusing on staying in the saddle. The pain in his shoulder had become a fiery agony that consumed his awareness, but he pushed through it, knowing their lives depended on his guidance. After an hour of hard riding, they emerged from the creek bed near a small cluster of trees. "Rest," Thundercloud managed, sliding from his horse. "Few minutes." Sarah helped him to the ground, her face tight with concern as she examined his wound by moonlight. "You're still bleeding," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "We need to stop it somehow." Using the last of their water, she cleaned the wound as best she could, then applied pressure with a fresh bandage. The brief rest revived Thundercloud enough to continue, though each movement sent waves of pain through his body. They rode through the night, stopping only when the horses needed rest. By dawn, they had covered another 15 miles, and Sarah announced with relief that they were nearing her farm. "Just beyond that ridge," she said, pointing to a low hill ahead. "We're almost home." The knowledge gave Thundercloud a final surge of strength. They crested the hill as the sun broke over the horizon, illuminating a small cabin with a barn and corral nestled in a bend of Cottonwood Creek. Fields of wheat stretched behind the buildings, golden in the morning light. "You have good land," Thundercloud observed weakly. Sarah's smile was tinged with sadness. Daniel chose well. He said water and good soil were worth more than gold. As they approached the cabin, Thundercloud finally lost his battle with consciousness, slipping from his horse to the ground in a heap. When Thundercloud awoke, he was lying on a bed inside the cabin, his shoulder bandaged and the worst of the pain dulled. Sunlight streamed through a window, suggesting it was midday. He attempted to sit up, only to fall back as dizziness overwhelmed him. "Easy now," came Sarah's voice from across the room. "You've lost a lot of blood." She appeared at his bedside, offering a cup of water, which he accepted gratefully. "How long?" he asked after drinking. "2 days," Sarah replied. "You've had a fever. I wasn't sure you'd make it." She hesitated, then added, "I dug the bullet out and cleaned the wound with whiskey. My father was a doctor. I learned a few things watching him." Thundercloud nodded his thanks, impressed by her competence. "Daniel?" he asked. "I buried him yesterday," she said quietly, "under the cottonwood tree where he liked to sit in the evenings. Would you like to see when you're stronger?" Thundercloud agreed, though it was another day before he could stand without assistance. Sarah proved to be an attentive nurse, changing his bandages, preparing nourishing broths, and helping him walk short distances as his strength returned. On the 3rd day, she supported him as they visited Daniel's grave, marked by a simple wooden cross. Thundercloud stood respectfully as Sarah placed wildflowers on the fresh earth. "He would have liked you," she told Thundercloud. "He judged men by their actions, not where they came from." Thundercloud considered this. He was wise man, brave to stand against Warner. Sarah's smile was sad but proud. Yes, he was. And now I have to be brave too. Warner won't stop because Daniel is dead. He'll still want this land. The reality of her situation was stark. A woman alone had few defenses against men like Warner and the Blackwells. The law offered little protection, especially to a widow without powerful connections. As Thundercloud regained his strength over the next several days, he helped Sarah with chores around the farm, repairing fences damaged during their absence and caring for the livestock. They fell into an unexpectedly comfortable routine, working side by side during the day and sharing quiet meals in the evening. Sarah spoke often of Daniel, painting a picture of a kind, hard-working man with dreams of building a legacy for their future children, children who had never come. Thundercloud shared some of his own story in return, his childhood in 2 worlds, his time as an Army scout, his decision to live apart from both white society and the reservation. One evening, as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset, Sarah asked the question that had been building between them. "What will you do when you're fully healed? Return to your camp?" Thundercloud had been asking himself the same question. His shoulder was healing well, and soon he would have no reason to remain. Before he could answer, the sound of approaching horses drew their attention. 5 riders appeared on the road leading to the farm. Jacob Warner himself, flanked by the Blackwell brothers and 2 of his ranch hands. Thundercloud and Sarah exchanged alarmed glances. "Get inside," Thundercloud said urgently, reaching for his rifle. Sarah shook her head. "This is my home. I'll not hide in it." She retrieved Daniel's shotgun from inside the door and returned to stand beside Thundercloud on the porch. Warner halted his party a respectful distance from the house, removing his hat as he addressed Sarah. "Mrs. Kingsley, I was deeply saddened to hear of your husband's unfortunate passing," he called, his tone falsely sympathetic. "I've come to renew my offer for your property. Given your circumstances, I'm prepared to be generous. $200 in cash, today." Sarah's grip tightened on the shotgun. "This land is not for sale, Mr. Warner. Not at any price. Please, leave." Warner's face hardened, his pretense of civility evaporating. "Be reasonable, Mrs. Kingsley. A woman alone can't manage a farm this size. It's only a matter of time before you're forced to sell, and my offer won't be as generous then." Sarah didn't waver. I said leave. This is my property and you're trespassing. Warner's gaze shifted to Thundercloud, contempt evident in his expression. I see you found yourself some protection. Temporary, unsure. The Blackwells here have some unfinished business with your Indian friend. Mason Blackwell spat on the ground. You cost us 3 good horses, Injun. We aim to settle that debt. Thundercloud remained impassive, though he recognized the precariousness of their position. They were outnumbered and outgunned. Even if they survived this confrontation, Warner would simply return with more men or find another way to force Sarah off her land. You killed my husband, Sarah said, her voice carrying clearly in the evening air. Everyone in the territory knows it, even if you paid the sheriff to look the other way. Warner's smile was cold. Dangerous accusation, Mrs. Kingsley. Without proof, it's just the bitter words of a grieving widow. Sarah's laugh was sharp as broken glass. I have proof, Mr. Warner. Daniel wasn't just a farmer. He was educated, cautious. He kept records of every threat, every encounter. And he sent copies to his brother in Chicago, a lawyer with the railroad company. This was news to Thundercloud, and judging by Warner's expression, to him as well. Sarah continued, her confidence growing. If anything happens to me, those documents go to the territorial governor and the Chicago Tribune. How would that affect your business arrangements, Mr. Warner? Your political ambitions? For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Warner's face. You're bluffing, he said, but his tone lacked conviction. Test me and find out, Sarah challenged. Or leave my land and never return. Those are your options. A tense silence followed as Warner weighed his choices. Finally, he replaced his hat. This isn't over, Mrs. Kingsley. He turned his horse, signaling his men to follow. Mason Blackwell seemed reluctant to leave without a fight, but a sharp word from Warner compelled his obedience. They watched as the group rode away, dust rising behind them in the golden evening light. Will they return? Thundercloud asked quietly. Sarah's shoulders sagged slightly as tension drained from her. Eventually, but we've bought time. She looked up at him, her expression vulnerable for the first time since they'd met. Was it true? About the documents? Thundercloud's question was answered by Sarah's slight smile. Daniel did keep records. Whether they would stand up in court is another matter. But Warner doesn't need to know that. Thundercloud felt a surge of admiration for her quick thinking and courage. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose, they remained on the porch, watching the distant riders disappear from view. Sarah moved closer to Thundercloud, her arm brushing against his. You didn't answer my question, she reminded him gently. What will you do when you're healed? Thundercloud considered the woman beside him, recognizing something he hadn't experienced in years, a sense of belonging. In Sarah Kingsley, he had found someone who saw him as he was, without the prejudice or romanticism that typically colored white perceptions of his people. And she needed him, not just for protection, but as a partner in the difficult task of preserving what she and Daniel had built. I will stay, he said simply, if you wish it. Sarah's eyes filled with tears as she looked up at him. I can't ask that of you. Warner and the Blackwells won't give up. Staying means putting yourself in danger for a fight that isn't yours. Thundercloud shook his head. I choose this fight, this place. He hesitated, then added softly, this woman. Sarah's breath caught. Thundercloud, she began, her voice wavering. I'm still grieving Daniel. I don't know if I can. Thundercloud placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. I understand grief. It needs time, respect. I offer partnership now, protection. Rest will come, if meant to be. Relief and gratitude washed over Sarah's face. Please don't break my heart, she whispered, tears spilling onto her cheeks. I couldn't bear to lose someone else I care for. Thundercloud's reply was solemn as a vow. I will protect your heart with my life, he promised, drawing her gently into his arms as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. They stood together on the threshold of something neither had expected to find in this harsh, beautiful land, a second chance. Whether it would lead to love, only time would tell. But for now it was enough to know they would face whatever came together. The land that had witnessed so much bloodshed and loss might yet nurture hope and healing for two souls who had found each other against all odds. As night settled over the Dakota territory, Thundercloud felt a sense of peace he had not known in years. Whatever dangers tomorrow might bring, tonight there was shelter, purpose, and the promise of belonging. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left.